Nice.
On air.
Call to order the regular city council meeting for Monday, September 16th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. I'd like to welcome everybody here for tonight's meeting. And at this time, I'd also like to ask if you silence your cell phones, put them on vibrate to limit interruptions and out of respect for those who will be speaking. Let's move on to item number 1 on the agenda, and that's the roll call.
Blessum.
Here.
Fuller.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Olson. Here. Pittner. Here. Ross.
Here.
Samuelson.
Here. Item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to item number 3 on the agenda, that is the mayor's report. Just a few items just to make note of since our last meeting. I attended a early childhood summit, learning a great deal of information about the need for that 0 to 5-year-old attention. It was a wonderful conference, and I learned a lot. Hope to keep sharing some information with the council and with the residents as time goes on. Task Force 21 meeting, I was at an abbreviated alcohol ordinance review committee. I was there for a short time. I also spoke at Kiwanis Club, Sertoma Club, and congratulations to Minot State. I attended some of their homecoming festivities over the weekend. Hey, 3-0 for the Beavers, so good job, Minot State. Also attended the Destination Development Grant Kickoff downtown. That was a wonderful event, attended by the Lieutenant Governor of the state, and gave a welcome to Councilman Samuelson and his buddies at the Plumbing and Heating and Cooling Contractors Conference here last Friday. Attended the Air Force Ball, and that was on Saturday, and going to be attending the Nuclear Triad Symposium that is taking place, sponsored by Task Force 21, which will be taking place in Washington, D.C. Later this week. And also at this time, we have a check presentation. I'd like to give a little bit of history on this one, but a few months ago, I had a discussion with a local resident who was concerned about, like everybody else, was concerned about the air quality with the smoke, and asked what it would take to get some air quality monitors in the city. And in discussions with XL Energy and some of our department heads, we were able to put something together, and we have XL Energy here, Beth from XL, to be a part of the check presentation. Do we have that?
Well, I know our check.
Okay, a check presentation, and I don't know, Beth, do you have anything you want to say? I'm not putting you on the spot, but no.
Hi, Beth Feldner, XL Energy. Thank you for having us here today, and I want to say thank you to Mayor Ross for reaching out to us. XL Energy, we're not in the air quality monitoring business, but the environment is very important to us. And as we are a company that operates in 8 states, including Colorado and Texas, wildfire and that air quality impact is something company-wide that we are paying a lot of attention to and thinking about in the future, even if it isn't impacting North Dakota right away. Somehow that smoke is still making its way over here. So we appreciate the ask. It was an easy one for us to say yes to, and thank you again.
Thank you, and we'll grab a quick picture.
Minot, North Dakota is taking a big step forward in improving air quality awareness. Thanks to XL Energy and the Minot Fire Department, purple air sensors are being installed at fire stations 1, 3, and the Minot Police Station to provide residents with real-time, reliable data on the air we breathe. These advanced sensors monitor air pollutants like fine particulate matter, giving you a clearer picture of the quality of air right in our community. Whether it's from wildfire smoke, vehicle emissions, or other sources, purple air sensors offer minute-by-minute updates on the air around us. With data available online and through mobile apps, you can make informed decisions for your family's health. like when to stay indoors or take extra precautions during poor air quality days. Thank you to XL Energy for purchasing these purple air sensors and partnering with the Minot Fire Department. Together, we're helping Minot breathe easier.
And I'm not sure if they said that, but I think there are going to be 3 sensors located, one on North Hill, one on South Hill, and one down in the valley. So we'll have a pretty good idea of the sensor. And there's a live shot there that you can see. One is at the airport fire station, and one is at fire station number 1, I believe. So thank you, Beth. Thank you so much. If there are no questions on the mayor's report, we can move on to the city manager's report. Harold.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. As always, outlined as a memo with activities and updates on projects and different things for myself as well as various staff. I would be happy to answer any questions the council may have at this time with regards to anything related to that. And if not, typically, here in the recent past, the second meeting of every month, we've had a kind of a financial update or 101 from our finance director. But given what's on the agenda tonight with the public hearing and first reading of the budget, we felt that was enough attention for finance tonight. So unless there's any other questions, I don't have anything else for discussion with the council this evening.
Are there any questions of Harold? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 5. That's the Planning Commission. Item 5.2, the public hearing on zoning map amendment, Minot's first edition. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to speak in favor of or against the proposed zoning map amendment. Second call for anyone wishing to speak. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council? What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd close the public meeting and approve the agenda item.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll. Or
We're going
Please
to try
vote.
the electronic vote, see if that works. Reminder to hit save once you put your vote in. Do you hit save, Mr. Zimmerman?
It can come up. And the other one doesn't work either.
So close.
call the roll.
Okay. Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Samuelson.
Yes.
Blessum.
Yes.
Fuller.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Moving on to item 5.3, the 16th Street Addition preliminary plat. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mark. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So I just
Rob.
I just had a quick question. This land that they're subdividing off, this is on the Spartan Finch building or whatever it is. Are this chunk that they're trying to subdivide off there, is this where we're talking about putting our 2 retention ponds on this 16th Street project? Is that accurate?
We'll bring Lance up for that. Answer that question.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Fuller, that's correct. So the city will be eventually purchasing Lot 2, which is where the detention ponds will sit for our 16th Street project. So that'll be coming to you probably sometime in November.
Okay. So they're doing this because we're planning to buy it from them.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Samuelson.
Yes.
Blessum.
Yes.
Fuller.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to action item 6, a public hearing on Renaissance Zone Case M-107, conditional approval for 11 East Central Avenue. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to speak in favor of or against item 6.1. Second call. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Discussion. Any discussion? Scott?
I have a couple of questions that might be for Brian. On the application, it has the current value of $381,000, and then it says estimate value of $750,000. And on Ryan, the city assessor, on his estimate, after the renovation and stuff, it's gonna be $480,000.
Mayor Ross, Alderman Samuelson, the city assessor's letter is accurate. The full and true assessment value of the property today is $381,000. The applicant is requesting the 5-year benefit, which would then invest 50% of the property's value. They're proposing to invest $225,000, which is about $30,000 over the minimum required. The city assessor looks at the improvements that are proposed, and they would estimate that after the work is completed, the property would be worth about $480,000 at that point.
So on the original, like on the original application, is that was just an estimate by
By the applicant.
the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay, so then the same would be for the 5-year estimated relief. They had $11,500, and the appraiser has about $40,000.
Correct, yeah, I would go with the appraiser's numbers. Those numbers are definitely more accurate at this point. The applicant put in the estimates at that point, but after the application is filed, then we send all the paperwork to the assessor's office, and they come up with their estimates.
Okay.
Rob?
Brian, just real quick. So you said 381,000, they're gonna put 225,000 in it roughly. How are we, after they put that much money into it, then how is it only worth about $480,000?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Fuller, that would be a question for the city assessor. Like I said, the improvements, they're not expanding the size of the building. It's gonna be like re-roofing improvements, HVAC, ADA improvements. So obviously, it's gonna help improve the value of the building, but they're not really doing any major expansions within that building, adding more space.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
No.
Blessam,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to item number 7 is the consent items. We have 12 items that are on our consent agenda tonight. We've been asked to pull 7.12. Are there any other items that need to be pulled this evening? Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council?
Move
Make a-
approval on the remaining items.
We have a motion by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
Yes.
Blessam,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Yes.
motion passed.
Moving on to the only item pulled from the agenda, that is 7.12, Safer Grant Writing Service Contract, Lexipol. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Paul for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lisa. Discussion, Councilman Blessam.
So, and for the, I guess for the chief, but more in general. So, the way that I understand where we're headed here is we're about to approve a consultant to come in and help us write a SAFER grant to try to get the funding to cover 3 years' worth of 3 firefighters. Is that generally where we're at?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Blossom, yes, that is what we're looking for. I am going to be talking with the city manager. Since it is a 3-year grant and there was some recommendations within the CPSM study about additional firefighters, maybe we could get 6 to cover the other ones, but that'll be coming to the city manager and then probably to this body to approve. At this point, the plan is for the 3, and it is a 3-year, no cost to the city if we are successful. At this point, we are gathering data and sending it to them, and then they'll do an assessment to see how successful we would be. We're not even going to go down the road if we don't feel that we're going to be successful on it, and that's based on our response times and all those other things. So.
Okay, so thanks. So my concern with it is that we're doing an approval right now in our consent agenda that sets us on a path for a future council to already have built-in firefighters that we either need to fire or fund. And so that's where we sit tonight with a $4,500 proposal in front of us to do the grant this way. And so I guess I just throw that to my colleagues. I don't, that's where we're at. I know that there are additional approvals that'll come along the way, but we're headed down the path now if this is what we're doing, and that's outside of the budget process.
Harold.
If I may, this ties directly back to the CPSM study that talked about proper staffing levels in a safe way that meets the National Fire Protection Agency's recommendations, which is the standard of best practices that we would need to do. That study came back and outlined that we were understaffed in order for our firefighters to do their jobs safely. So as we talked through the budget process and our commitment to try and bring back a recommended budget that held the line on property taxes, one of the things that we discussed and that the fire chief recommended was before we build this into the budget, because it was originally built into the budget for 2025, that perhaps we pursue this funding that would keep the cost of that off of the taxpayers for a few years before we built that into the budget. So what we're trying to address here is a safety issue for our firefighters that came out of that study that we had done.
Mike?
Okay, so if we do have that safety issue, I guess I'm wondering why we're playing around with it then. If we're putting firefighters in the field that are not safe today under the normal standards across the country, I was in part of the budget discussions. I remember that conversation. I know where we were at, believe me. I guess I sort of understand how we got to where we are today, but I guess we got to figure out if this is what we need, then this is what we need. And I realize we made that decision in the budget early on, but we're sort of not matching those two thought processes in my mind. If we have the need, then we better find the funding.
Any further discussion? Scott?
I would be in agreement with Alderman Blossom because we're setting up future councils for funds that we don't know what the allocation is going to be, where it's going to come from, and I think we should actually have the discussion about adding them without going through a grant process looking for money for it.
Any further discussion? Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Chief. Chief, are you fully staffed for what is approved in your budget?
Yes, I currently am. I did have a resignation, but I'm actually hiring, I think, one day before that guy leaves. So yes, I am fully staffed.
Okay, thank you. And the reason I ask that question is, we will have openings between now and 3 years from now, and I get the concern of tying the hands of future councils, but through attrition, we can choose not to hire new positions if we are successful in this funding for 3 years. And if we get 3 years of firefighters and we have a resignation or a retirement or someone quits, we have options to not fill those positions, whether it be within the next 3 years or 5 years from now. So just my thought.
Chief, is this just kind of an exploratory with the consultant?
Mayor Ross, when we were going to put it in the budget, like City Manager Stewart said, this is an option for us that we could save 3 years of staffing. costs on the citizens to be able to save the money. So I asked for it to come out, and we had a long discussion because he is very much in favor of safety and making sure we have the staffing that we need. So we pulled it out just to be able to take a shot at this. And we do have some anticipated retirements the next few years. Actually, they're going to be the chief officers, or most of us are going to be leaving and retiring. So.
Any other questions of the chief?
Mayor.
Mike?
So Chief, could you elaborate? I want to make sure I caught what you were saying before. So were you saying actually when we start this grant process, you're going to explore whether we should be adding 6? And that was part of the question that I had before. The 3 that we talked about during the budget process was 3 for 1 station. And that actually had to occur across 5 stations, is the way I eventually came to think of it in my head. Is that truly the case to meet CPSM? Is that we have to add 15 firefighters across the 5 stations over time?
Mayor Ross, Alderman Blessum, there's actually quite a few recommendations from the CPSM for staffing. One is to add an additional engine, that would be 12. One is to add an additional 3 or 1 per shift to one of the ladder trucks that we already have. There's recommendations for FIT, which is a field incident technician, and that would basically be doing some succession planning for the chief officers that are going to be leaving. So there's multiple things that we've been discussing and how we can fund them. So we're kind of weeding through all those recommendations, and then how can we, use a safer grant to get potentially those FIT, the field incident technicians, and then we'd be able to do some succession planning for the chief officers that are going to be leaving, because that is such a different role than what a normal officer does, a captain does. They're boots on the ground incident, and then you take them out and they have to be, just overseeing the incident and commanding everybody on the scene. And it's hard to take them away from their normal duties to get them the training that they need and the on-the-job training that they need.
And continue. So can you talk about the timeline? So with if we went forward and let's say we were awarded a grant, because my assumption is even with the grant, that cash has got to come in. We've still got to have the positions budgeted. Is that right? So at the earliest, the way we sit right here tonight, and we got work to do later tonight, but that's not in there for 25. So 26 would be the first time that we would see these 3 firefighters, even with the SAFER grant?
If we're successful in getting the grant, we would propose a budget amendment that would receipt the funds and then budget the expenses, and the 3 firefighters would be added into the budget at that time. So it's dependent in response to the conversation. If you don't want to pursue grants for this, and you want to talk about the city funding it 100%, we can do that. We were just as staff, we were trying to provide that relief to the citizens that they didn't have to pay for it yet, but we could still add the services and the staff if necessary. But if the council wants to go, and we can talk about this later in the budget conversations, if you feel that the city and the citizens should pay for that now, we can make those changes and we can add them in the 2025 budget or the 2026 budget. But as the chief outlines, for NFPA standards, for us to get up to that level, there's multiple changes we need to make, and staff is trying to take the approach to phase that in over time in a fiscally responsible way that hopefully minimizes trying to put all that onto the budget all at once. So, but we'll follow the speed and the direction that the council wants to go, depending on what you choose to do. My ultimate goal is to get our fire department to a point that we're meeting the NFPA standards, because that verifies their safety, the safety of our citizens, and that we're providing the best fire service that we potentially can to our community.
So if I can continue. So for me, I guess, to me, I flip that over in my head, though. I mean, to me, we should make the case that it's a need and then decide, okay, is there a grant? Because if the need's there, we better figure out a way to do it. And then if there's a grant available, great. We offset the cost for a little while. So I just feel like this is a little bit reversed, and it's a little bit, it's sort of pulling it back to its lowest common denominator as a starting point, setting up a future council to foot the bill is really what it comes down to. So I'm just having a little bit of a hard time with it, I guess.
Any further discussion? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a couple of points. First off, if we can save our taxpayers our local taxpayers, local dollars. It just makes sense to me. And so I'm grateful that our city staff is looking at these grants, and hopefully we're able to get them. And as far as having future councils deal with something, that's their job. Tonight, we have a job because we've been elected, and 3 or 4 years down the road, if there's different people sitting in these seats, it's their job to make the decision at that point. But we can't worry about them. We need to take care of what we need to take care of tonight.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Kelly. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
No.
Blessam,
No.
Fuller,
No.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, that's our action items. 8.1, driveway appeal and request for special permit, 2200 4th Avenue Southwest. What are the wishes of the council?
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Rob. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Scott. Discussion. Is there any discussion? Lisa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be voting in favor of this based on the memo that came from city staff. However, this is the second time that we've done this in a couple of weeks, and I think if this is going to continue, then we obviously need to look at making it a permanent change so that we're not going to be kind of piecemealing this each time that someone makes a request. So that would just be my concern, that if we continue to get these, we need to look at it more holistically.
Rob?
Kind of on the other side of that from Alderman Olson, I think the process is working correctly. That's what a variance is for. We have an ordinance in place and they can come to us and ask us to change it or give them a special variance if we want to. So, I mean, I don't mind that these come before us if people have questions and want to work the process. I think if we take it away and just make it open, then we're going to have, that's where the problems probably start, I would assume, so.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
Yes.
Blessam.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Moving on to item 8.2, approve the 2024 bond resolution for 2024A issuance. What are the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Lisa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Scott?
So I'm not going to be voting in favor of this, and the biggest reason is because of the lighting district. I believe that the city shouldn't be putting more on property owners than they already have. Our city has $40 million in general fund reserves. And we're going to have the taxpayers that already have basically given for that reserve to ask them to give more. We give downtown businesses, we give up to $180,000 for improvement for a facade program for businesses downtown. We spent $1 million almost on a signage program. We approved to spend $1 million, and then it becomes $3 million for a quiet zone. We give millions of dollars in property tax relief for business owners to improve their properties, and now we're asking our property taxpayers to pay more. And on top of that, in that bonding, we're asking them to pay for the engineering for people that already do engineering for the city. There's administration costs on there, which is what the city is doing, the administration and stuff, and I don't think we should be doing that to our taxpayers.
Is there any further discussion? Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Scott here on this. Again, when we look at the lighting district and everything else, the city's putting a bunch of fees on top of the original amount. Again, we're charging our citizens more to handle this and to finance it and do all of that for them. My question would be with the lighting district, aren't lights part of essential city services for public safety? I mean, why do the citizens have to pay for that when we're paying property tax on an annual basis every year? And the second one on the traffic signal district, that one seems kind of weird because Trinity was the one who requested that traffic signal out there. Why are we paying for it as a city? So those are the only two questions I had, and I'm not quite sure that that this is fair to the people in that lighting district at all.
Mike?
I guess just a clarification for me, is this, I'm with where the two aldermen are thinking here, but all these decisions have been made, right? I mean, council's already acted on these. We're at the final last step. In fact, did I get that right? We issued these bonds. So I don't know how that process works exactly this way, that we approve it tonight when we actually sold them, I think earlier today or whenever that was. So that's a little strange to me. But while I've got the same questions that Alderman Fuller and Alderman Samuelson do, I think this is water under that bridge already. And we just need to finalize the process here.
If I could ask the finance director to come forward, I believe that staff asked permission from council a couple of meetings ago about going out to sell these bonds, which this council approved.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this was actually last year when this when these special assessment districts came in front of the council for approval, and there was considerable discussion on how the funding was going to work. But once those were approved and we went through the process, the project was constructed, the contractors have been paid, and now we're just in the process of closing that out and certifying the special assessments.
Any questions of Dave? Thank you, Dave. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Hittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
No.
Blessam,
Yes.
Fuller,
No.
motion passed.
Moving on to item 8.3 on the agenda. What's that?
I forgot to call Janser, but he did put his in, so it does show up there that it was a yes. I apologize.
Item 8.3, the 2026 Highway Safety Improvement Program signal revisions. What are the wishes of the council? Wishes of the council?
Stefan,
I'll make a
Mr. Mayor,
motion.
I move we approve it.
We have a motion by Mark,
Second.
second by Rob. Any discussion?
So, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Mike.
Is there Stefan, there's a presentation that we've got. Do you intend to go
Okay.
through that, or? Okay.
Second here. All right, thank you, Jen. Mayor Ross, members of council, really want to provide a quick update, really background on this project. Jen, can you go to the next slide? So back in 2021, the city submitted for a Highway Safety Improvement Program grant, HSIP. We was at 26 intersections, a combination of left turn signal head improvements, kind of flashing yellow arrow, protected green arrow, accessible pedestrian signal push buttons. Those are the push buttons that really talk back to you, tell you which street to cross. Pedestrian countdown timer, that's your walk, don't walk with the countdown. And dynamic no right turn signs, that's kind of a pedestrian safety improvement for there. So on the right there in the green is the 26 intersections that were originally applied for as part of that project. Jen, can you go to the next slide? So as part of a standard DOT process, when they invest money into traffic signals, they do what's called a signal warrant analysis. So all those signals in there that are kind of circled in red did not meet volume warrants for a traffic signal, but only 2 are recommended for removal. That's really the North Broadway and 5th, 6th Avenue, and the Burdick Expressway East, 8th Avenue. southeast. The reason the other ones aren't, you could say, recommended for removal is that there's other underlying conditions, Minot North High School going in there, possible roadway reconfigurations, future growth, site distance issues like that. Then can you go to the next slide? So what we're looking for today is an option here, a recommendation from council on path forward so that the state can finish out the design for this project and kind of get that back to bid, back to council. There's three main options we can do. Really, this is, I'm gonna say, from North Broadway and 5th, 6th Avenue. The options are the same between the two intersections, but they can be made independently. So the first option, option one, is do nothing. I'll kind of walk you through kind of this little table here. Option one, do nothing. That is, we request the intersection to be removed from the project, no cost for the HSIP project. Number two is the city could write a justification letter expressing our desire to have the improvements put into the project. The DOT has told us that instead of the 5% cost share we would have for this intersection, it'd be bumped up to a 50% cost share. Or option three, or the removal of the signal. This is what staff recommends for North Broadway and 5th, 6th Avenue. But I also want to throw out on the right, those right two columns. This intersection is due for improvements from both a signal cabinet and video and then a signal repainting project. So if council wants to keep this intersection in either the do nothing or justification letter, staff is looking at coming at this intersection in the next couple of years with a signal cabinet improvement project, as well as a painting project. So we want staff or council to understand that, and then in about 15, 20 years, this intersection will be due for a replacement. The signal project that's going on right now, for reference, South Broadway and 16th Avenue, that is about a $550,000 improvement using 2024 dollars. Jen, can you go to the next slide? So again, a lot of same options here for Burdick Expressway and 8th Avenue. There's do nothing. We can remove the signal from the project, move forward with that. We could write the justification letter to keep the improvements in, or we could remove the signal with a conversion to a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. RFB is similar to what's out by the zoo, the courthouse, and that's set up. So same thing, that intersection is due for cabinet and video upgrades. That's about $130,000 using 2024 funds. And then also so we understand, staff understands the concern during special events, state fair, that signal is important. So what the DOT recommends and staff supports is during special events, the intersection, if option three is supported, to go from a two-way stop to a four-way stop with a rectangular rapid flashing beacons to support that pedestrian movement across Burdick there. Then can you go to the next one? So bringing this back around a little bit, we had a public comment period and open house a year ago in November of 23. There weren't really comments on North Broadway and 5th, 6th Avenue. There were comments on the Burdick intersection, Burdick and 8th Avenue by the State Fair. State Fair, Rendery Electric, and Minot Soccer Association all wrote letters to the city opposing the signal removal for that intersection. But ultimately, staff recommends option three, the signal removal for each intersection with the conversion at 8th Avenue, the State Fair intersection, to have the flashing beacons installed. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions?
Mr.
Mike.
Mayor, just a clarification on the motion then. So is the motion to accept the staff recommendations, which would be option three for both items in one motion?
Mark, you were the motion.
Yes,
That was your intention?
yes.
Okay, so if I can continue, I guess my take on it is we don't have a lot of feedback on Broadway and Fifth and Sixth. You know, just me, I drive through there a couple times a day sometimes. That one makes sense to me. The one at the fairgrounds is a little tough. And I would actually rather see this split for discussion even. To me, the Broadway and Fifth and Sixth is pretty straightforward. I think the fairgrounds, we should have some discussion on. That's my take on it.
Would that be okay to split those, Mark? Without objection?
I'm agreeable to that.
Second is agreeable. Are there any objection from that's okay to go that route?
Yep, that's fine. You just have to decide which one you're going to address first.
Okay, we'll address the Broadway one first. Is there any further discussion on the Broadway? Seeing none? Call the roll.
And just a point of clarification, so the motion on the table in regards to the Broadway single, is it removal? Okay, option three
yep.
is removal of the signal.
That's correct.
Your answer?
That's correct, yes.
No, your vote. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Samuelson?
Yes.
Blessam?
Yes.
Fuller?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Passes. Now we'll move on to the East Burdick one out by the fairgrounds. Is there further discussion?
Yeah, and maybe for you, Stefan, I guess, you know, this was before I was on council. I'd like to understand a little bit what some of the concerns were from the letters that were received. Because again, as I went through there, drove out again, certainly during events, this is a big deal. And even, you know, the thought that came to my mind was during events, if we removed it, do we need an officer directing traffic? Like during the fair, it's crazy. And so, you know, a four-way stop, especially with multiple lanes in both directions, as well as a turn lane left from the hotel side, I don't see a four-way doing real well during that period. And so that's where my mind went, first of all. And then even outside of that, you're at high rates of speed. Are we at 40 on Burdick? It's 30?
It drops down just east of that intersection.
Just east, okay. So, because that's the other thing I was worried about, is just high rates of speed. You know, I like at Corbett, I like that light. I think that one's useful. You know, I think at the courthouse, that one also works pretty well. I get worried about the high rates of speed. So just driving through it, living here all my life, that intersection to me seemed pretty iffy to take the light out. And so I guess feedback on what their feedback was.
Yeah, so it's at a traffic signal warrant, you take the typical day. On a typical day, there is no state fair, there's no event out there. On a typical day, that's not warranted. So the DOT standpoint was, well, if it's not warranted typical day, let's remove that, and we'll come up with really another solution, which is the always stop with the peded flasher alternative on there. They did come back to say the city can choose to keep that signal with, I think it was option 2, or really option 1 and 2. So they are okay with that signal being in place for that. And so are we if council ultimately goes that direction.
If I can continue, just to clarify then, so did I catch that right, that would mean a 50% cost share if we chose to keep it sort of against their advice with the warrant?
Correct.
Okay.
Paul. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Stefan, we see him during the reconstruction projects that are going on right now, temporary signs during State Fair. I mean, is that an option to put up as temporary stoplights?
Yeah, that would certainly be an option.
Okay, what, if I may continue, cost on something like that for the city, or do we own?
So the city does not own signals. For example, the 2 sets of portable signals we had this year, I think ran the contractor $30,000 each, $30,000 for the whole setup.
Okay.
And that's a rental for a month. You know, if you do, you could say a long-term contract for that, maybe you can bump that down year after year, but yeah.
Anything else? Anything? Rob?
I just, I understand why North Dakota State Fair and them had objections. What was Verendry's objection?
I believe they have their annual meeting there, so they have like 2,000 people show up on one night.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Scott?
I would agree that for most times that signal probably isn't needed. Living over there and using that road every day, there are many times when it is needed, when there are events. And I don't know how with a four-way stop or portable lights, it would do the trick. I mean, when you go to, especially the state fair, and then on Sundays after racing, traffic backs up, and I think it should stay.
Any further discussion? Lisa?
Yes, and I don't know if you have the answer, Stefan, or perhaps someone else, but what would be the funding source then if we left the light?
See if I can grab that.
Mayor, while Stefan is looking that information up, I just want to clarify the motion on the floor would be to approve the staff recommendation, since that was the motion that was split. So just some clarification there for the council.
Thank you.
Sales tax infrastructure funds.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sales tax infrastructure funds.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Stefan. Scott?
So just to clarify, the vote is to remove it.
The vote is
I say
to.
yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Which is option 3. That is what we're voting on. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Janser,
No.
Olson,
No,
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
No.
Samuelson,
No.
Blessum,
No.
Fuller.
No.
Motion failed.
Do we,
Mr. Mayor,
Mark?
I would move that we leave the signal light in place.
We have a motion to leave the signal light in place on East Burdick. Option number 2?
Well, Mr. Mayor, both options 1 and 2 leave it in place. So we need to know which of the two we're intending. Is that correct, Stefan?
That's correct. So option 1 basically leaves the signal in place and removes it from the HSIP project. Option 2, we write the justification letter to the state to keep the signal there and to keep it in the HSIP project. So the push button improvements, the left turn improvements, and the no right turn improvements would be included in that. Included in option 2.
In option 2. So out of those two, what would your recommendation be?
If we're going to keep the signal there, my recommendation would be option 2,
Okay.
to have the improvements put in.
Okay. Is the motion maker okay with that?
Yes, option 2.
Second?
We don't have a second.
Second. Okay. So we have a motion and a second for option 2. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Fuller.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Moving on to item 8.4 on the agenda, approve the second extension to the contract assignment between the City of Minot and Matson Construction. What are the wishes of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval.
I have a motion by Mike, second by Paul. Any discussion? Is there any further discussion?
So,
Mike?
Mr. Mayor, just to more for the public's knowledge, I think, just to make sure we understand. So, the way that I'm reading the memo, all that we're looking for here is a couple months date-wise, no additional costs, just making sure we got everything buttoned up by the middle of December.
Yeah, Chris, if you want to come up, we asked him beforehand, but if you want to come up and talk about where we at percentage-wise on those two projects.
Certainly. Mayor Ross, members of the council. So yes, you are correct, Alderman Blessum. There will be no cost increase. We're just asking for some extension. There has been some delays. So they have found some contaminated soil that they needed to remove, as well as some reconfiguration of some sidewalks around one of the building. So there would be no additional cost. Building B, the family homeless shelter, is approximately 85% complete, and 17-unit LMI
housing complex is about 70-75% complete.
If I can continue, just Chris, also then, does that still fit about what the timeline we expected, right? Because we were expecting the RFP decision-making early December. Was that the thought process?
Yeah, Mayor Ross and Alderman Blessum, yes, we have the December 16th deadline that I am going to bring the new subrecipient to approval for council, so that would coincide with that date.
Any further questions of Chris? Thank you, Chris. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Blessum,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Chancer,
Yes.
Bittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
Yes.
motion passed.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 8.5 on the agenda as the public hearing on the budget. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to speak on the 2025 proposed budget. Now is your opportunity to step forward. Second call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Alderman. Tom Worsaki, I live at 3748 White Pine Circle. I actually have a question regarding the budget. About a month ago, there was a consultant here on the benefits side of the budget that made some recommendations on what to do. And so I have a specific question as to what is the intention in the budget process on benefits. And then the reason why I'm asking this question is during that meeting, in my opinion, the city manager inappropriately talked to the city council about the fact that the city should not touch the benefits of any employee. And I think that was wrong. I think it was wrong to do it publicly. So I wanted to understand publicly what is the pardon me, what is the intentions of the city. Thank you.
Want to address that? Or we have Lisa?
Well, ultimately, the decision on benefits is up to the council at this point. The city manager recommended budget included full implementation of wage adjustments and increases. It included a 5% assumed increase of health insurance benefits, which we got that quote back at 6.5%. There is some potential changes that we can do to keep that within the 5% or less. Those were some of the presentations from Brown and Brown several meetings ago. I did advocate during that time frame on behalf of the employees that I would recommend that the benefits stay where they're at. That is not a directive that the council cannot change those if that's what you choose to do. That was simply my recommendation, trying to maintain employee concerns and morale and those kinds of things. But ultimately, that's a decision of the council, and I hopefully will receive more clarity this evening from what the wishes of the council is and how you would like to move forward with that.
Thank you, Harold.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, one of the things, I guess, and I'm glad that we got the answer right away. I would like, within reason, if we could try to answer questions. Certainly, it can't be Q&A all night because we're facing a longer meeting anyway. But within reason, I think that'd be a good thing if we can.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, Travis Zablotny, 1412 12th Street Southwest, Minot. I guess first question I got a question that I need a clarification on. Maybe I'll ask the mayor. Is it correct in my understanding that our budget surplus is somewhere north of 40 million and that it is in excess of what state law allows us to have? Is that correct?
I don't know. Is it, are we at 40, Dave?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, to address that, state has a limitation on the amount the city can carry over in what's called the interim fund, and that is limited to 75% of the what's in the general fund or what the expenditures are that's budgeted. And in our last financial report, we ended the year, we were in excess of that amount, so we had a corrective action that we had to do and implement a plan. And we've had that conversation at a prior meeting. Basically, where that excess funds came from is from the process of saving up for large capital projects, and we just didn't transfer those funds into the capital projects. We left it in the general fund, and that caused us to go over temporarily.
Okay.
So I guess my follow-up question would have been, what is our plan to address that ultimately? And is there a plan in this budget cycle? It's my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that our budget surplus comes from budgeting, for example, positions that don't get filled. The taxpayers still fulfill their obligations by providing the taxes levied that are budgeted for filling positions, and then the dollars that don't get spent go into that surplus. And this goes on year after year, as I understand, at least in recent years, and that we build up these large capital reserves. My concern with that is what the city does with it, because what I've witnessed over and over again, that money is no problem or no object when a special spending project comes up. Why? Because we got it in reserve. So it seems to me that we intentionally, many times over budget, don't fill positions or don't spend the money, put it in reserve, and now it's just a slush fund to do whatever it is that this body decides to do. And what I'm seeing most times is it's not something that is a necessity in this city, and the taxpayers are funding it. And that isn't what they were led to believe, or at least should have been led to believe had they participated at all in the process, which, by the way, I'm going to say this on record. The next time I hear a citizen complain about taxes in the city of Minot, I'm going to ask if they've showed up to any budget hearings, because I know what the answer is for most of them. And I understand why you feel free to do what you do. It's because nobody voices where they stand. It's very disgusting to me. And so citizens stop complaining and show up to this process. But nonetheless, I would like to see those reserves brought down. I think they become too tempting to spend on things that aren't necessary.
Continuing on with the public hearing. Those who wish to speak on behalf of the budget. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council? Mike?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
A motion by Mike, is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Paul. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Blessum,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Motion passed to close the public hearing.
Missed me.
Oh,
But I was-
Samuelson,
But
sorry.
I was a yes.
Sorry, the votes go in and, my,
Yeah.
sorry. Right.
Okay, now is the time for discussion among the council. As we go through the budget, just a few, we want to keep it for staffing. And I think at this time, Dave, if you and Jenna want to move up front, we're going to have our finance team up front for questions. What's that? Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was a motion to close the hearing, so now we need a motion. I would entertain a motion to approve on the first hearing, to move forward.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Now that's where we're at, so. Okay, so just to keep it, keeping in mind the staff who's going to be, if there are changes that are coming, just to try and keep them as clean as possible. We'll vote on an amendment. I just don't want to jump down into the rabbit hole amendments, so we'll try and keep it clean at that point. So we'll start, Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think we need to address Mr. Warsaki's question. We'd had a memo from the city manager, I think late last week, regarding the benefits and perhaps some changes in what we could consider. And so whether the city manager or the city finance director has information for us, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Olson, I think we'll be working through that here shortly with the process. The HR department has been working with the consultants. There are a number of different options to be considered to bring that cost down with the benefit package. And some of them have no impact on employees. It impacts the city's risk tolerance a little bit. And some of the other options do have some impacts to some of the employee population.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Dave, just to continue on that, then is it your suggestion that we give you a little bit of time and we handle some of that at the last reading?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, I think we have numbers for these options to decide on, and I think earlier would be our preference.
Okay.
Good. Michaela?
I just want to let you know, Lisa, Katie Vidal is on, and she is with Brown and Brown. So if there are any specific questions relating to their presentation, I believe she came on to the meeting via Teams to answer anything for the council as well.
Any discussion? Any amendments? Mike?
All right, so let's get the fun started. Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we accept the city manager and HR director's hybrid wage plan for 2025.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mike?
All right, so Mr. Mayor, this is one that, I've been on the record saying I was uncomfortable up front. I don't think in my mind that it makes sense to try to fix our budget woes on the backs of staff. And so as I went further through the process, though, the recommendation of the city manager, the recommendation of the HR director, these are the two folks in our organization at the city that have the most knowledge and the most, I guess, background to give us a recommendation. And so I took that into account, and that helped me understand kind of how to get my mind around it right. As I looked through the numbers, I worked with the HR director to understand top to bottom, employee by employee, understanding what this was doing person by person. I can tell you that I feel comfortable. One of the reasons for that is that the original 2.3 full plan adjustment resulted in over 7% across the board for our staff. And there's nobody here saying that they're not worth every penny that we pay them and whatever we can. That's not the question here. The question here is, how does that line up with the market? How does that work within our budget and the different challenges that we have with that? How does all of that work together? And the thing that I'll tell the council, I'll tell the public, is that in all of my 30 years in private industry and working in businesses and senior leadership at major Fortune 500 corporations, a 5% increase on average across the board is incredible. In all of my time at Delta Airlines, I think we hit 4.5 1 year. Most of the time it was 3. Some years it was 2 to 2.5. And so the fact that we're able, even with the hybrid plan, to give 5%, I feel very good about. I think it's the right direction, and I applaud the city manager, the HR director, for bringing that forward, because it was important that we take into account what the public is saying and that the tax burdens that are there and making sure that this all works. And so that's why, for me, this is the right plan and the right number.
Any further discussion? Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So while I'm partially in agreement with Alderman Blessum, I sat down and I looked at this, and first I want to applaud Harold and the city staff for the budget they brought to us. It gave us a really good starting point. I honestly believe they did a good job. I think we have a unique opportunity here, though, to make right choices while still achieving significant savings within our city budget. by doing the right thing, I mean ensuring that we properly support and care for our city employees. I mean, we hear constantly how great our city employees are, how awesome our city employees are, how we need to take care of them so we don't lose these city employees. And I'm with Mike. I understand that there's a certain amount of increase that's appropriate and not appropriate. My question is, the savings that the hybrid plan that the city manager and HR brought to us saved us about $700,000. And the Brown and Brown plan to reduce the insurance benefits is about $400 and some odd $1,000, depending on which way we go. I think that was the most we could save. So that's about $1.1 to $1.2 million. My question is, people, we have a $228 million budget. You're telling me we cannot cut $1.1 to $1.2 million anywhere else out of this budget other than the employees' wages and the employees' insurance benefits? I mean, that's absolutely astounding to me. I've looked at budgets for 20 years, and you can always find places to cut that don't cost the employees. And as Mike said, why are we taking these cuts off the employees' backs? I mean, these people go to work, and going forward, I think everybody's going to have to realize we have to look at some kind of alternate wage increase, because as we've heard a number of times, it is not sustainable doing what we're doing right now. Now, I don't care how we do it. I mean, I had looked at a couple things. I had spoken briefly with Lisa about some things. My question is, why do we, and we have grades within the city, right? Certain grades make above a pay level and certain grades make below a pay level. And so my plan, or what I've looked at, is to take the grade level 76. 76 in that grade level and above are our highest wage earners in the city, and 75 and below are our lowest wage earners in the city. Now, the 76 and above can have a 2.5% raise. Those people make the most money, and during hard economic times, they're the ones that can absorb the little bit of an increase, decrease that they would see. But the people that are below that level making that money, that is everyday people, the boots on the ground people, our police officers, our street workers, all of those guys who are making a living and are in the hardest financial and economic economy we'll probably see in our lifetime over these last 2 or 3 years. And we're talking about taking from them. I have a hard time with that. Now, one of the things we can do, like I was saying, is above that grade 76, give those people their 2.5% raise, and give everybody below 75 and below their full step and merit raise. Again, knowing that next year we have to address our wage increase and how we're going to do it. Now, having said that, I think, and if we do that, that saves us, I think the hybrid plan saved us $700,000. That plan would save us, what I just suggested, would save us about $110,000. The other thing I wanted to say is we leave the employees' benefits just exactly how they are, and we take the stop loss up to that 125 or 150 mark, which brings our plan down to about the same as we paid last year. So there's no increase, no difference whatsoever. So how do we go ahead and do all this without increasing taxes or any of that other stuff? Well, I've looked at a couple different things in this budget, and I've identified 8 or 9 different GL accounts that we can selectively target and pull that $1.2 to $1.1 million out of and keep everything the same. Maybe we don't buy a certain piece of equipment this year, but we look at it later down the road, or whatever it is. Another option that we have, and I'll be honest, this one to me, I know we're going to have a lot of discussion about this, but we have this general fund reimbursement line item every year that we put $3 to $3.5 million back into the general fund. Now, most of these funds are brought in through the levy and given to different departments within the city that use those property taxes to function. And then we turn around and we give them back to the city because the attorneys helped with this, or this department helped this department with this. That to me is odd, because in 25 to 30 years of business, I've never seen any entity that I've worked for, talked to, or worked with that if one department within their company helps another department, they reimburse each other for the work done. They're all city employees doing city work, so why would we need to reimburse? So in my mind, what I see is those levied funds come in, they get used in the department, and part of them are given back to the city. I don't necessarily want to say they're cleaned, but levied funds have a restricted use that you can use them for. And when they come back to the city, they go into the general fund and we can use them for whatever we want to. So ultimately, the easiest thing to do was this year, our general fund reimbursement is just over $3.5 million. My recommendation, so we don't have to dig through all the general or the GL accounts with Dave and everything, is to just reduce our general fund reimbursement from $3.56 million down to $1 million. That gives us a savings of $2.56 million. And I know somebody's in here is going to pop up and they're going to say, hey, that's going to prove that we're going to have to, the mills are going to come up. Well, I'm going to argue that because every single year we overtax and we underspend and money goes into our general fund. So if we actually just even this out where we aren't doing that, we're not going to have to change the mills or do anything at all to accomplish this goal. To me, it makes more sense than anything else out there, because do we need another $3.5 million going back into our general fund on top of the $40 million plus we have already? Or can we pay our city employees and leave their insurance where it's at and then address this next year, knowing everybody in the city now knows we have to look at this. We have to figure this out, because we can't keep doing these increases on the backs of the employees and on the backs of the citizens paying taxes. It just can't keep going. So while I understand there's a motion on the floor and I don't know the correct way to do this, I think we need to amend the approval of the hybrid system and go with my hybrid 2.0 or whatever we want to call it at this point, and try and figure this out. Give the employees what they were told they deserve and get, and then next year address both the general fund reimbursement account and the employee wage increase in a more fair fashion than I think it currently is. Thanks.
Is that in the form of an amendment, a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment then. We had a motion on the floor.
Let's go through the first.
I had one other thing there too. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I also want to say that I think we need to move both the fire and the police pension systems back over to the first responder PERS. And, I know it's going to be said, well, where do we get the money to do that? Again, it's going to cost us roughly $240,000 to $250,000. We're sitting on $40 million in excess reserves in our general fund. I think we can afford it. We just bought a $900,000 piece of property that we're going to put a flood channel through. For God's sakes, let's do the right thing here. Okay, now, sorry.
Okay. So, in order for all of this to kind of take place, we have a motion and a second on the floor. That would have to be voted down, and then you'd be able to make your motion. Does that sound perfectly fine? Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. So are we, is that what we decided? I mean, we didn't vote on that. Are we not amending motions?
So I think that's what the chair had kind of set out before this meeting, was that he wanted to to resolve the amendments as they were presented to the general motion. If you want to rescind your initial motion, that would be one way to dispose of it as well. If you want to, and if the second agrees to rescind
That's not my intent.
your amendment, you could do that. So,
That's not my intent.
okay. So then the motion on the floor would be to adopt the hybrid plan. There's been a motion and a second. That would be the motion before the floor. We're still kind of in the middle of discussion. If that fails, then Alderman Samuelson could offer his amendment up in regards to the wage plan.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can continue,
Yep.
is it your ruling as the chair that we're not entertaining amendments to the motions?
Yeah, in the past, and I'm going even last year, we just, and I'm doing that on the benefit of the staff, just so, if we keep going down amendments to, and it's just a paperwork nightmare. So I would just like to have it cleaner, smoother. Let's entertain your motion. Your motion's on the floor. You got a second. We're having discussion. If that goes, it goes. If it doesn't, then we have an opportunity to have Councilman Fuller's motion come to the floor and seek a second. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think Michaela told me she likes writing amendments to motions. So, but in all seriousness, I appreciate the hybrid plan. I appreciate the work done by staff. I I'm somewhat in line with Alderman Fuller and his idea. And I agree that when you see these 4, 5, 6% increases to staff with wages, I view it at this point somewhat of maybe a Stockholm syndrome. Maybe we were that far behind the market already. Maybe we were 8% behind where we should have been. Well, you should be happy you got 4. You should be happy you got 3. I think in order for us to be competitive across the state, within our own community, with public-private sector, we don't need to be the best or the highest paying, but I think there has to be somewhat, I guess, point being, we've done this before. We've done this before where we've neglected employees with wages and benefits, and we saw a mass exodus that cost this city millions of dollars. And I'm not willing to repeat that mistake. I think the city can find, we found it. The staff did their job. They gave us a 0 increase budget with a full pay plan in place. I'm not interested in saving a couple bucks or a couple pennies on the backs of our employees, because they are tax-paying citizens that live in this community. They do pay taxes. They're part of this team, and to me, I want to take care of them because it's easier to keep our employees than find new ones, and it's a hell of a lot less expensive. So I'll be voting no on the motion on the floor.
Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. So I think back a few meetings, it was our HR director, when she was making the recommendation that we look at the hybrid plan, that some of our employees would not get either a raise or much of a raise. And if I remember correctly, I think it was some of our employees that are working at the 911 dispatch center. So if we could get a clarification on that, because while I'm in favor of taking care of our employees, I don't want to see one group of employees not get a raise.
Alderman Olson, Mr. Mayor, all of our employees, even with the hybrid plan, would get some sort of a raise. We do have some employees that are at their top step and their grades have not moved, so they are at a maximum raise of 2%.
But if we adopt the full plan, is there any group of employees that will be kind of treated unfairly then?
No, again, there are some employees that are at their top step and at their top grade that has not moved, so they will get what has been promised in the past with the full plan.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mike?
So one thing to note, if we were to vote no on the hybrid plan right now, and go to what my friend Rob has suggested, we've got work to do then to figure out how to do the other things that have also been identified as important. Fixing benefits and making sure that we're not putting that on the backs. Also looking at moving fire and police to the other PERS program and not shorting them. But now we don't have the funding. We don't have the savings that the hybrid plan produced, according to the council president's memo. And so I just want to make sure the council understands that we've now got work to do to go find those funds if we intend to do those things. And so I hope the team is ready to go dig those up.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve the hybrid plan and a second. Seeing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Blessum?
Yes.
Fuller?
No.
Dancer?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Bittner?
No.
Ross?
Yes.
Samuelson?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Moving on. Mike?
Okay, so let's continue then. So let's take a look at moving the police department, the fire department out of the public safety PERS. And I believe that's a $250,000 cost that'll come with that. And so my motion would be to make that change going forward.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can we get clarification on the dollars and just what that does and the timing and things like that?
Who would be that?
Alderman Blessum and Mr. Mayor, Council, the approximate cost is about $250,000 additional.
Mr. Mayor, if I can continue.
Continue.
And is it just a step that's done right away? They move right away in 2025? How does the process actually work?
It would be, they would be moving right away in 2025. We are giving people the option now if they'd like to move into the regular PERS plan, but we would have to sign resolutions to start that in the 2025 process. So there's something we'd have to bring back to council.
Something back, okay, that's what I was looking for, okay.
Good. Any further discussion? Thank you, Lisa.
And so, Mr. Mayor, just to point one thing out here, one of the things that, this was another part of the council president's letter, something that we felt was important to put us on a good playing field in terms of fire and police statewide. The example that was given to me, if we've got a police officer that's considering coming to Minot and they're in a community that's already on this PERS program, coming to Minot is actually hurts them, and they start over in the PERS program that we have in place. And so, to me, this is very important that we get done to make sure that that part of it is a level footing for our staff.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Blessum,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson.
Yes.
Motion
Motion
passed.
passes.
Mr. Mayor.
Mike.
All right, so next, I'd like to take a look at the health insurance program. So my motion would be to leave, to take on the full brunt of the change to the employee so that we continue to cover their plan as is, but that we increase the stop loss to 150,000 to try to offset that as much as we can.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Does that make sense, Kayla?
Got it, Michaela?
I'm just putting amend to increase the stop loss on insurance to 150,000. Is that
Is that
appropriate?
all we need?
Okay. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second. Harold.
Just for sake of transparency, should this motion pass, that would represent a 0.2% increase in health insurance costs for the renewal, which is underneath the 5% that we've already budgeted. So this would be a savings, but not at the expense of the employees. That would be the city as an employer taking on that risk on the claims.
Lisa?
Thank you. And I am interested in knowing what the cost would be at 125,000 stop loss.
Alderman Olson and council, the cost for the $125,000 stop loss is a savings of $286,000. The $150,000 stop loss was a savings of $392,000.
Thank you.
Lisa, do you have a percentage rate on that information on what the percentage increase would be with the 125,000 compared to the 0.2% increase with the 150,000
It's
stop loss?
1.9%.
1.9, which is still underneath the 5%. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Lisa?
So, yeah, again, just a clarifying question then. So at 125,000 stop loss, we are over the 5% increase or we're under the 5% increase?
You would be under.
Okay.
So if you were to make no changes to it and accept and continue with the 100,000 stop loss, that would be 6.5% increase.
Mhm.
If you would follow the recommendation or the motion that's on the table right now and change that stop loss from 100,000 per claim to 150,000, that would decrease the percentage overall premium increase to 0.2%. And then if you do the 125,000 stop loss, that would be 1.9% increase over what it is today. And we budgeted, we assumed a 5% increase. That's what we built into the budget. So either one of those options, the 150,000 or the 125,000 would be well below the 5% that we built in. So either one would represent a savings in what we budgeted. But that would be on the administrative side of the city, and the city employees would see no changes in costs as far as any of the coverages or total out of pocket or anything like that. The plan would stay the same for the employees as it currently is now.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? We have an amendment and a second on the floor. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Blessum,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
No.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Mr. Mayor. So if we can continue with the council presidents, Mark, I'm sorry I'm taking all your thunder, but hopefully we're getting your stuff done here. The next item then on his list was to remove the HR specialist position, so I would move that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove?
Remove.
Remove, okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just
Yes.
clarifying that, so, I think this is one of those situations where, given unlimited resources, given, unchallenging times, we would want this, because as we talked about during the budget process, we talked about additional training, we talked about the things that can be added to a great organization. And I don't think there's anybody up here that doesn't agree with doing those things or trying to make them happen. And I realize that means that in order to do those, we're asking more of the same staff, and that's not lost on me whatsoever. We are in that challenging spot, and these are the types of decisions we're elected to make, and that's what this is about.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Was it Alderman Fuller or Alderman Samuelson that seconded that? Fuller.
Me.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Blessam.
Yes.
Fuller.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Yes.
Bittner.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Samuelson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Any more, Mike?
Yep, 1 second. Yep. If I can get my computer up. If the PIO can bring up days 2, please. If I can get logged in, there we go. Okay. All right, so, Mr. Mayor, the motion that I'm gonna make is that we return a total of $7.2 million, but for the 2025 budget, return $3.6 million back to the taxpayer for what they've been overtaxed over the last few years. And I'm gonna walk those that are watching the council through my thought process here. So the $7.2 million that we're talking about is something that is a real number. There's a reason that I chose that. As you can see here, I'm returning half of that back in 2025. I think there's a case to be made for returning much more than that right away, but political realities sometimes cause us to go in a certain direction. So I'm asking the council to approve half of that going into this year. So from our annual comprehensive.
Do we want to get a motion and a
Yep.
second before discussion?
I'm sorry, I didn't ask for the second. Yep, did you get the motion?
So there is,
The motion that I have.
Back one slide.
I'll be clear about the motion to restate it. I want to take the $3.6 million number that I've got there and use general fund reserves to lower the property tax levy.
Second. That was.
is that Rob?
You guys sound so alike. It's
Are you caught up?
Should have split them up.
So amend to return $3,634,277 in general fund reserves by lowering the tax levy.
Yes,
correct?
so we would be spending reserves rather than taxing.
Got it.
Okay,
We do have a motion and a second, so floor is yours, Mike.
ready to roll. All right, so from our annual comprehensive financial report, which was referred to a little bit earlier, the finance director talked about that a little bit. In that report, we were given the following findings. So Ide Bailey is our audit accountant who took care of this, and you can see on the left there, not expecting anybody to read it, it's tiny. We have what's called excess cash reserves, and we are in material non-compliance with state law. So as of December 31, 2023, the city had cash reserve balances that were in excess of 75% of the annual appropriation for the general fund in the amount of approximately $7.2 million. So that's where my number comes from. The effect of that is that the city is not in compliance with the cash reserve requirements of Century Code, causing excess property taxes to be levied during 2023. So from the city manager's presentation on the budget, this is a cash reserve slide that they showed, and this is where the number of over $40 million at the year end for the general fund. Now, one thing to note here, as you look at the very bottom of the slide across there, the general fund has very little that's in committed projects right now. At the end of every single year, that all resets. So the dollars essentially become clean again, and they can be used for really anything that's appropriate under the general fund. Right now, then, the way that we lay this out, we have what we call 3/12 reserves, or 3 months out of 12 is what that comes down to. So the blue that you see there is those 3/12 reserves. We've also got a 30% operating reserve on top of those 3 months. And then over on the right, in that kind of greenish color, you see the available funds, which is another extremely large amount. And this is what adds up to the over $42 million that we ended 2023 with, sitting in our general fund. So how does that happen? This was referred to a little bit ago during the public hearing, but what happens is that we've got revenue over the last 6 years in a row that's come in higher than expected. Now, that's a good thing. Staff are doing a great job of predicting, and they're conservative. That's a good thing. We're getting more sales tax dollars than expected, keeping in mind that this also can go the other way. We could have a downturn and have sales tax not come in above expected. But for 6 years in a row, it's come in higher than expected. On the right-hand side, you can see what expenditures have done. And this also has been referred to a little bit earlier. We consistently, for 6 years in a row, have spent less than we expected. Now, if you're running a business, this picture among these two slides adds up to a great picture, because that's profit. You're bringing in more money than you expected, and you're spending less than you expected. That's a good picture. Governments are not in business to make profits. That's not how that should work. Governments exist to provide services at a break-even point. Folks, we're not doing that. We are not breaking even as a city, and we haven't for more than 6 years. And so what this does over time is it adds up to a big pile of dollars sitting in the general fund, available for other uses. And that's where we sit today. And so what happens is we have decisions that come before us that get very easy when we have over $40 million sitting in the bank. And that is not something, number one, that I'm willing to live with long term. I would rather have us either putting that to work, or in the better case, and what I'm suggesting we start tonight, is that we return that to the people. Because you know who knows what to do with the money? The people who actually had it in the first place. And so that's where my motion is headed. So this is what this would do. My proposal right now that's on the floor, the city manager's budget, the one that we started with tonight. Now we've made some adjustments from there, but we started with 115 mills, which would have cost, and I'm using a $300,000 house just as an average to give everybody an idea what that looks like. That would have been about $1,553 on that house. This would lower the levy alone to about 100 mills. That would result in a savings on that $300,000 house of about $200. Again, I would love to sit up here and find something that saved everybody $5,000, but that's not in the cards. What we have to do is do the hard work to nibble at the edges like this, but moving $200 is meaningful. And it shows that this council and that the leaders of our city care about the strains that are on the people. Here's the other great thing about this process. This has nothing to do with any staff being hurt by a wage decrease or benefits or anything like that. It has nothing to do with less service to the public. It has nothing to do with anything that anybody will notice other than dollars in their pocket. And so my proposal to the council is that we return those dollars that we overtaxed. Our auditors told us we overtaxed, and we need to return that to the people. One thing to note for the public, and I've got it on here, we're just one of the taxing entities in our city. So keep that in mind. I've got the city portion highlighted. So as you look at your statements and at the dollars that we're asking you to help provide public services for, we are only dealing with the city tonight. That's why when I show a $300,000 house at $1,500, that's just the city portion of what you've got going on. As was mentioned earlier, if you've got issues with the rest of the list, you've got to go talk to those entities as well. And believe me, when I was at the school board last week and we had one person go to the podium, it was loud and clear to the school board that they got to do whatever they wanted with your money because nobody's there to say a word about it. So I would hope that we have more engagement as we go forward. That's part of what I ran on to get into this position, was that people get more engaged in their process and work with us to try to move things forward. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll leave it to the council to decide.
Any further discussion? Scott?
I'm in agreement with Mike, and I will support this. I think anytime we are overtaxing our citizens, we need to give it back. It doesn't hurt anything because we also do have reserve funds in sales tax, and of course, it's not gonna hurt NAS and it's not gonna hurt flood control because we have reserves in those funds too in collecting sales tax. So I support this 100%.
Any further discussion? Seeing, whoa,
Sorry, just so I'm understanding, is the motion just for the year?
Yes, just for
2025?
Yes.
Lisa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this sounds wonderful, and I hope it is, but I'd like to hear the other side if there is another side. Whether it comes from the finance director or the city manager, is there something that we're not hearing or seeing in this proposal?
On, right?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, some things to consider with this is some of those funds have already been spent now in the current fiscal year of 2024. So some of that has already gone and brought us under that limitation. Some other things to consider is we know that we have a need identified with the rehab of the Legacy City Hall building as it's being referred to that isn't included in any of our CIP plan or the current budget that's in front of you. So what number that ends up being, that is not contemplated in the current budget. So the anticipation was that whatever number is decided there, the likely funding source for that would be reserves. So that would further deplete the reserves on hand going forward. To go along with that, we are just in the early stages of funding a legacy infrastructure project referring to the flood control project. We still have hundreds of millions of dollars left of local share to fund our portion of that in the next 12 to 15 years. So that is a little bit of a concern. As long as the low interest funding programs are available to us, that makes that a lot easier to accomplish with the current allocations of sales tax. But even with the low interest financing, we're anticipating that we're going to have to reallocate more funds to be able to service the debt. If we have to go to the open market with that, that greatly impacts the math on that because as we take on more debt, it adds more risk in the bondholders. It's risk in return, so they would demand a higher rate of return. So there are a number of unknown factors that are still in front of us yet that we just really don't know how that's going to play out. There are other options, and just I didn't have this conversation with Alderman Blessum beforehand, but just off the top of my head, we have an unfunded pension liability that is out there that we're funding every year that impacts our budget. That that is something that we could put that money towards that unfunded liability, would in turn reduce how much we'd have to fund towards the legacy pension and have some effect in that. We'd retire that liability and get it off our books earlier. So there are some other things like that that would be an option if we're concerned about getting rid of some of that cash, that we could retire that unfunded liability.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Harold?
Just to respond to Alderwoman Olson's question, I think Dave gave you some great responses. I will say that to a significant degree, I'm in agreement with Alderman Blessum. I've been on the record since becoming in as city manager that our reserves are significant. Although I think one difference of philosophy of approach probably maybe between me and Alderman Blessum would be is I would probably recommend that we invest those into projects that benefit the community as a whole, maybe rather than necessarily lowering the levy. However, with that being said, the council does have a unique opportunity to provide some relief now that most communities probably couldn't do. So if that's the will of the council, you can do that. You'll be able to do that for a few years, potentially. But eventually, as we begin to address all the issues and concerns that the finance director just laid out with projects and needs for investment and those kinds of things, that will begin to creep back up potentially. Of course, that's assuming what happens on the ballot in November with regards to property tax. But eventually, at some point, you're going to have to find somewhere to find additional revenue to replace that at some point in the future. And so for me, the debate is, does the council give this back as property tax relief now, immediately through the levy, knowing at some point that that's going to have to be found another way, or whether these reserves be invested into projects that potentially relieve pressure off of future budgets, similar to what Director Lakefield just stated with regards to pension plans, or, the city engineers talked to us about needing to invest money in streets, and a lot of our investment is into catch-up, trying to fix streets, and eventually getting to a point where we have a level investment every year that maintains the streets. We haven't talked about Third Street Bridge. At some point, we're going to have to make repairs to that or replace it and those kinds of things. So do you use the money you have on hand now to do that? Or do you give it back in relief and then figure out another way to pay for that later on down the road? I think that's really the crux of the conversation. But what Alderman Blessum has on the table today is doable. And I'll state what I stated in a previous meeting. He had the slide up there that showed the 3/12 and the 30%. I think that's redundant. So I would believe that 6 to 7 months worth of reserves for those emergencies is sufficient. And again, as I've stated, since I've come in as the city manager, those reserves are heavy, and which is unique. I have not been in a lot of communities that are in this financial situation. But ultimately, it's at the discretion of the council how you want to put that money to work on behalf of the citizens. Whether you want to give it back as tax relief now through the mill levy in the upcoming budgets, or whether you want to invest that into projects.
And as a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, can you remind us, either finance director or the city manager, how much of our reserves have already been brought down with your recommended budget?
I don't believe the city manager recommended budget for 2025 does not anticipate using any general fund reserves.
Thank you.
And in previous years, I think in the current year we're in, I think the council took action to use some of that, but so far we're not on pace to spend any of those reserves because revenues continue to come in better than projected.
Any further discussion? Whoa. Mark?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mark.
Just a question, and maybe he doesn't know at this point, but question for the finance director. You indicated that some of those reserves, the number that the 40 million was the number at the time that the report was issued. Do you have the figure on what that number is today?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Janser, that's a little bit of a difficult question just because of where we're at in the year with not being completed. But just some of the big ticket items that we have used here recently, the buyout of the leases of the street graders, I think was about 1.2 million. We've allocated some funding for some used fire trucks. So there have been a number of items that have come that weren't contemplated in the original budget, as well as the expenditures, some of those capital funds that took place earlier in the year.
Anything else, Mark?
No.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Any further discussion? We have an amendment and a motion. Lisa?
Thank you. And we're talking two different funds, so when I recall back to this story, it was not property tax dollars, it was sales tax dollars. But when our sales tax revenue was really, really good in about 15, 16, 17, we were able to make many different organizations within our community kind of benefactors. We were able to invest in some public projects, and it was great. It was wonderful. I mean, we can see those projects around town. And then the ship hit the sand, and we were out of our reserves, and we had to give a huge increase in property taxes to cover the bills that we had. And so I'm still recalling all of that as I need to make a decision on Alderman Blessum's plan. While I want to have our taxes as low as possible for our residents, I also know that we need to be the stewards for our community, and situations like that can occur.
Rob?
I guess continuing on what Alderman Olson was saying, honestly, we don't have a revenue problem here, guys. We bring in plenty of money. We have a spending problem in the city of Minot, and that's what we're seeing right here. We're talking about spending on other projects and stuff like that instead of giving the money back to the citizens whose it was. I mean, seriously, we have enough projects for the next 15 years. I know there's going to be things that come up. I know there's going to be emergencies that happen, but this money is the people's money. It was taxed by them or from us or by us to them. They gave it in. We haven't spent it. Let's give it back to them. There's no point in sitting here determining if we need to spend it on something else. It's their money.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I think it's a novel idea, and I think it's doable, like the city manager said. The one reservation I would have would be, and I agree, we haven't spent it, and whether you believe that as a pro or a con of previous budget cycles or previous department heads managing their budgets and watching their spending, I'm not opposed to this idea, but I would like to, no matter which direction this goes with these dollar amounts that have been highlighted, at our second crack at this, at the second hearing, what projects we can invest in for the people. We have a legacy city hall building, we call it. That is the people's building. That is going to have to be addressed in some way, shape, or form at some point. And if it's cheaper to spend those dollars today than 10 years from now, when costs we know are only going to go up, maybe we tackle some of these projects earlier and take the burden off of future, off of my kids and your kids. So I would like some ideas from staff on those dollar amounts that have been highlighted out maybe for our second hearing.
Mike?
All right, so just a little bit of color kind of with some of the discussion that's going on here. So just one thought process to take. We could take the 3.6 that we've got that I've proposed. We could spend another 20 out of reserves to drop it by $23.5 million to drop our reserve totals. And we still would be above what Grand Forks ended 2023 with. Now, we've got different challenges than they do. Nobody's disputing that. That's why my proposal isn't for $15 million to go back to the people, because we do have things that are coming. There's no question about that whatsoever. I think this is the right approach to try to give the people some relief that have been taking it on their backs for many years now. And I think it's time to do that because we've got the ability to do it.
Scott?
I agree with with Mike, and you look at it, we're not talking about depleting this reserve. We're talking less than 10%. It's about 8% that we're using to give property tax relief to our citizens, which we voted earlier tonight to do for a business. And I think it's only appropriate that we do it for our citizens. It's one time when we can give them, and probably in the future, to give them some of their money back.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. No further discussion. Please call the roll.
Blessum,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Bittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Yep, a couple more, Mr. Mayor, so hopefully relatively lighter topics. The first one, I'm going to make a motion that we increase the recycling receptacle rate in line with the other receptacles, bring it up to $2.60. And so that's the motion, but one of the things for the discussion, I realized that was the dollars were arrived at, probably trying to hit a target. So I would be open to the finance department giving us what that adjustment should be. But anyway, that's my motion is to bring it to $2.60 from $2.50.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, just to continue there, I don't see a reason why we would take one portion of our collection process and not increase it with the others if there's a reason to increase it in the first place. If there's no reason to increase it, then we shouldn't increase the other ones. And so I would just like to see that included in the mix. I brought that concept. I would be open to adjustment if there's a concept from finance that would make a little more sense.
Any further discussion? Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like, and I'm sorry, my memory isn't good enough to remember if there was a commitment made to keep the fees for recycling at the initial level for some length of time, or I guess I'd need to go back and check on that. I'm not necessarily opposed to the concept of that kind of an increase, but I guess I'd like to make sure that we aren't going back on some word that was given when we adopted the recycling. So if we could do that, maybe wait on this until we get that information. Be my hope.
We're having Mr. Sorensen step forward.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, no, there was no commitment at all that was made. That number came about initially because of a whole bunch of assumptions, and I would have to crunch numbers and see where we're at, but 10 cents on a receptacle is not a huge increase, and we all know that the recycling program, it's a program that costs us money. So any revenue in is it'll help balance the project. So,
Mr. Mayor, can I continue?
Yes.
So with that, Jason, can you tell us the thought process behind the increase on the other fees?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum. So basically just, looking at capital purchases and things of that nature and just dividing that out and seeing, where our budgets lined up with our rates. Landfill rates haven't gone up for, I think it's about like 4 or 5 years, so it was probably time for an increase on the landfill tipping fees. And then similarly sanitation, we probably didn't do a good job 5 years ago of accounting for the replacement of our initial truck fleet, so now we're getting into those, and they've gone up in cost, of course, so we've had some costs that have gone up here in the last couple of years that, adjustment to those rates now will help build that rate going forward.
Mr. Mayor, can I continue? So with that, Jason, with what I said a minute ago, if I said to you, hey, I'd like to see something on the recycling rate, would you want to readjust all of them to kind of hit the same target you had? Is that the right way to think of that? Because again, I'm not here just to add fees for the public. That's not my point. My point is to make it match and make sense across the types of containers.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, so remind me, I think rates for garbage, water, and all that, they get approved in a resolution, correct? So if you want, I could bring back on second reading, that's when I think we plan on bringing in some of our water rates, sewer rates, and some of those adjustments. I could bring those all in at one time, and that would give me an opportunity to look at it and kind of see where we're at.
Mr. Mayor, so I'm actually fine with pulling this back right now if we do want to take a look at that way, or if everybody's ready to roll. I'm fine either way. My point here was if we need an increase, I think it should be shared across all the receptacles.
Mr. Mayor, just one more thing. I have a question here because if I remember correctly, when the recycle program was instituted, we said it was $250 and you couldn't opt out. If you opt in, there's no way to opt out once you get on this program, right? It's stuck with the address. Now, if we're going to raise fees, are we going to give people the ability to opt out of this? Because otherwise, all I can see is going forward, we could raise this all we want and nobody can ever not say, hey, I don't want to recycle anymore.
Mayor Ross, Alderman Fuller, that's correct. It was a one-time opt-out. So if you opted in initially, you stay opt-in. And then during a change of address, then new people brought in, they're brought into recycling then automatically.
So if I can continue, I'd just like to, if we're going to increase fees here, I think we have to give people the ability to opt out, at least of the recycling program. That's.
Any further discussion? Seeing none? Thanks, Jason. Please call the roll.
Blessum.
Yes.
Fuller.
Yes.
Ganser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Mike?
Mr. Mayor?
One second.
I think,
Sorry.
oh,
Just going forward then, is it possible, I'd like to see something on a future agenda for an opt-out of the recycling program since we're raising fees, or is that something we don't have to vote on as a council?
We can certainly put it on a future agenda for discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
okay.
Mike?
Mr. Mayor, I think my last one for tonight. My last proposal is that we remove the hybrid bus from the budget.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to remove the hybrid bus. Discussion. Any?
Yeah, I think we've had this discussion. I think we're just a little bit early in this, and I've had discussion with city staff about our approach to busing overall and how public transit really ought to work. And I just think we're early to take this kind of step, especially with $1 million price tag, even if we do believe that we'd have federal funding to help take care of that. And so I think now is the right time to remove that.
Harold?
Just a point of clarification, is it to remove, is the issue the hybrid bus? Or are we not replacing a bus at all? So are you removing it, we're not buying a bus at all? Or are we not doing hybrid and we're proceeding with a diesel bus like we have in stock?
So my motion right now is to remove it and cut it from the budget. I would, if on second reading, staff has an alternative. I understand the regular diesel alternative at roughly $650,000 would be one. My understanding of that is that the reimbursement isn't there, and so we would be footing that bill at that point. And so the proposals that I've thrown out are to start taking a look at a different type of bus, similar to what Service Basin Public Transit uses. Something that we might be able to buy 4 or 5 of for the $1 million, and start moving some of our routes to a different type of bus. Now, there are ramifications to that. It's not a perfect system, but that's the type of proposals that I was working with staff on and throwing out. Right now, though, I don't believe our budget supports $1 million hybrid, nor do I think it supports a $650,000 diesel.
Here.
Just a point of clarification in response, there is funding for a diesel bus. It's just that the probability of getting awarded it in comparison to other communities is less likely than a hybrid.
I do see we have Brian Harenka online. Brian, is there anything you'd like to add? If you're trying to talk, you're on mute.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, yes, I would just like to add that I understand your concern moving forward with a hybrid bus, and that's fine. That's something we can look at further in the future. I've been in contact with the manufacturer, and they have actually offered to bring one to us so that we can look at that and take a closer look at that moving on to help us decide if it's something we want to go ahead with farther down the road. I would request that we still keep a bus in the budget, as our fleet is about 50% over its life expectancy. 50% of our fleet is beyond its life expectancy right now. A diesel bus this year is going to run between $600,000 and $650,000. I would believe we could conservatively say we're going to see a little bit of an increase for next year, but we would still be eligible for grants that would cover 85% of that cost. So at a $700,000 cost for a bus, possibly up to that high, I don't know what the cost would go up to, obviously, at this point. We would only be looking at 15% of that would be on the backs of the citizen of the community. 85% would be covered by federal grants.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mike.
So, Brian, what's the likelihood that we would get that grant funding?
I would say it's fairly good because we have 2 different avenues we can use right now. We are still eligible to ask for 5339 funding through the state of North Dakota, even though we are now a direct recipient of federal funds. So we have that avenue, and there is generally quite a large pot of money there to draw from, as a lot of the smaller communities have a difficult time coming up with the match money to tap into those funds. We'll also be able to tap into our newly approved 5307 funds that we're getting from the federal government if we needed to go that route as well. So I firmly believe that the opportunity to get another diesel bus to help shore up our aging fleet in the 2025 budget cycle would be very good, and like I say, at a cost of 15 cents on the dollar to the city.
Mr. Mayor, if I can
Mike.
continue on that. So, Brian, I saw a news story out of St. Paul where they had taken a step, and these may be completely different programs, so forgive me a little bit, but they'd taken the step of buying a fire engine, expecting to have the funding come through, and then didn't, and were on the hook for almost $2 million. So if you had to put a percentage on it, what's the likelihood that if we approve a bus, that we would be stuck with the full fund if it didn't come through?
Alderman Bless, that would not happen in that manner at all in this case. If we would approve the funding and you would approve the amount for, say, $700,000 for a diesel bus, and then we would apply for a grant, if we didn't get that grant, it would just, we wouldn't have to spend that funding. So I don't see any scenario where we would be on the hook for any additional dollars along that lines. And that's why I asked for the match money to be approved first, so that we have that already in place and we can tell the state of North Dakota or the Federal Transit Administration that I already have a commitment from the community to provide the matching funds before we ask for the grant monies.
If I may clarify, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Blessum, I think the difference here would be the city would secure the funding before ordering the bus. I think in that situation, they went ahead and ordered the truck, hoping that the funding would come through. And when it didn't come through, they were stuck because they already had a contract to purchase the fire truck. In this situation, we're putting in the budget, we would apply for it. We would only proceed with ordering and purchasing the bus, assuming that the funding came through.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can continue, what's the source of the funding for it?
The source of the federal funding?
No, the source of our funding, of our match funding.
Our match funding for this would be through general funds.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, sales tax funding would fund the local share.
So it's not general funds?
Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Blessum?
Yes.
Fuller?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson? Yes. Pittner?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Samuelson?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Are you sure? Okay. Anybody else? Any further discussion on the budget? Lisa?
Mr. Mayor, in President Janser's letter of recommendation, he did include $100,000 for a recruitment fund for our police department, and I would like to move that.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second discussion. Rob?
So I guess with that, before we can allocate 100,000 in funds, I would like to see how they plan to spend it to recruit. I think there's, as we're all aware, all of a sudden there's some issues going on within our PD, and I think we have to address those issues before we throw $100,000 against it and see if we can get anybody to come work for us. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing it, but I want to see how we're going to spend it and where that money would go. I want a detailed plan of how they're going to use that money to recruit. I think that's essential. I don't think we can just give them $100,000 and go figure it out. Let's hear the plan to recruit and then give them the money.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, so I'm in the same spot. I think it's likely the right way that we need to get to at some point, because it's a part of the puzzle. Now, whether it'll be successful or not, we'll have to kind of see what that plan looks like. But right now, we're in a position where we would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we would be asking the public through the property tax to fund a program for a department that's under some scrutiny right now. And I think it's the wrong time to do that. If we feel strongly as we get into the new year, or even if we knew it by the second read or by the final reading, we could take a look at that again. But as far as I'm concerned right now, this is the wrong step at the wrong time.
Any further discussion? Lisa?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think that we're combining a lot of things into this discussion. With the recruitment dollars, we would still have the right to approve whatever plan they brought before us. And if the plan was not acceptable, we would ask them to go back to the drawing table and create a new plan. So I don't think that we are just writing a check for $100,000 and saying, do whatever you want with it. But without the commitment for the funding, there would be no point in them doing that. I can also say that the state of North Dakota also found that across the state, our law enforcement agencies are having issues. So it isn't not just a Minot issue. And they did make funding available, allow the departments to come up with plans. I believe that our department did have a plan. It varied a little bit from some other departments, even from Ward County Sheriff's Department. So I think that we need to take the step forward and say, yes, the money is there, bring us a plan. Hopefully it's a good one.
Mike?
Mr. Mayor, just to respond on that, one of the differences with a plan like this, just doing the approval so we can read the plan later to maybe do it, means everybody here already got taxed. The dollars are already gone. That's how we grow our general fund pile of money that I was talking about before. And so that's why it's hard for me to say yes to these things, to take a flyer on maybe we'll need it, because we tax it. If we could go back and write a bill at that point to tax it, at the point that we approve it, and maybe that's what we can do through a budget amendment if we think that's the right path. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to charge the public for a plan that we may not be ready to approve right now.
Dave or Harold, did we do this at one point, a couple years ago? Is there a process of making the authorization but not funding it? Type of a proposal?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we took that approach in funding personnel in the police department with the high numbers of vacancies. That was an approach that was done, that we authorized the full number of employees and funded a few positions less than were authorized.
If I could ask the finance director a question. So we currently have a retention program that's funded through the state with the Back the Blue program, correct? Do we know how much money was allocated to the city of Minot for that, and how much of that still remains?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, was just a little over $102,000.
And has that been fruitful? Has it been used by officers, or is it not spent?
Yes.
Okay. I thought this question was coming, so I did look it up. Mr. Mayor, City Manager Stewart, $38,000 has been spent for employee retention, and I believe it was at the end of 2023 that was on all current police officers' payroll. We have $64,000 remaining for any other endeavors for the retention or recruitment, which I think the policy came through council already. I don't recall what date, though.
Kayla?
Well, and I'm not sure if Captain Plessis or Captain Sunbakken can speak on it, but I believe they just did a hiring process, and some of the new hiring bonuses were going to be able to be used on this one.
Mayor Ross and City Council. So we do have 3 hires that will be eligible for that, and it's a step kind of a process where they start off with a portion of it, and after their in-house is complete, they will get the rest of it. So 3 hires are right now eligible for hiring bonus.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, if I remember right, that's a $5,000 bonus
in total.
So
yes,
that would account for 15,000 of the approximately 64,000 that's available.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just continue with that, is there, does that renew? Is there, or would it have to go through the legislature again?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Blessum, I believe that was a one-time investment. So unless the legislature takes action to invest more money, it's not renewable.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mark.
I guess I'd just like to point out that we're 14 officers or something like that, understaffed. And so my thinking in putting this into my recommendations was that it would be used for trying to deal with that chronic problem. If the council chooses not to budget this money, certainly I would hope that if the department comes back and has a plan for recruitment that requires funding, that everybody be on board, if it was a good plan, doing a budget amendment to fund it. And so I guess my thinking prior to making the recommendation was, we've had this chronic problem, and we need to do something to try to fix it. And this is one of the things that seemed logical. So,
Thank you, Mark. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I find myself in line with Alderman Fuller, Alderman Blessam. I think we need to let the dust settle and maybe come up with a plan. Maybe this is a committee that needs to be formed with maybe someone chairing it from up here at the dais, and really come up with a plan. $100,000 just seems like a number. No offense to the president. I don't know what that means. I don't know where that goes. I don't know what that $100,000 equates to. Maybe we can put. Maybe we need $200,000 through a recommendation with the committee. Maybe we need 25. Again, I think it's a little bit of a cart before the horse. But just to be on record, I'm in favor of solving the issue. I'm in favor of solving the issue. I just don't know if right now is the time to apply a solution. Harold.
And I'm not opposed to that. I understand the situation the council is addressing. I do just want to stipulate that the 100,000 was not just pulled out of thin air. What we did is we talked to the police chief about how many vacancies he had, what we felt was reasonable in order to potentially fill over the next year, and then tied that $5,000 number to that. I believe we were targeting about 8 positions, which would have totaled about $40,000. And in addition, the chief had asked, not only do we have staffing issues with regards to our police force, but we also have it in dispatch. So he wanted to make that available to dispatchers as well. And then we rounded up from there. So that's where the $100,000 came from. It wasn't just for police officers, it was also for dispatchers.
My only concern on this is, and I see both points, and I can go either way. On one side, I just don't want to send the wrong message to the good officers that we have. If this is a message of, we're not ready to invest in you, because they're the ones who are putting in the overtime, working extra. So that's part of it. I also it's a good point. It's a valid point that, where they stand, and that's why I brought it up. I mean, is it something maybe we authorize and then fund it when they come back with a plan, which I think would still send a strong message that we're still in support of the operations at the PD. So that's my thoughts there. Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
No.
Ross?
No.
Samuelson?
No.
Blessam?
No.
Fuller?
No.
Janser?
yes.
Motion failed.
Kayla.
Sorry, just because finance has asked for a clarification, I just want to publicly clarify, so everyone is aware, with the previous motion to amend for removing the hybrid bus, that did not include adding the diesel bus. So I just want to publicly put that out there because finance wanted to double check and get clarification. So if they're asking, I'm sure there's another ask somewhere out there in the public. So it just removes the hybrid bus.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mark.
I'll make a motion to include a diesel bus in the 2025 budget.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Rob?
The only thing I think I'll say, and I'm fine with that, but I think it's all going to be hanging on whether we get the grant or not, right?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct. It would be building the budget, you would be authorizing, we'll be building the budget, and then based off that action, staff would begin applying for the funding. But as I stated earlier, we would not proceed with ordering or purchasing a bus until we were certain that that funding had been approved by the state. So that 85% is approved and available.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Mr. Mayor, so, one of the reasons that I brought the original motion to remove the bus in the first place was that I was hoping to spur a new thought process in our public transit world. We're running 33-person huge diesel buses around this city constantly empty. During school hours, we'll get them closer to full. But I guess I would ask people as they're seeing the buses around town, how often are you seeing anyone in them? And I'm not suggesting for a second that we don't bus. That's not my point whatsoever. All I'm asking is that we rethink the configuration of how we bus with a different type of bus. As I stated before, for the $650,000, we could buy 4 of the 15-passenger people mover style buses and maybe provide better service to our community for a similar price tag. And so that's really the main focus of where I was headed. So I'll be no on the diesel bus because I personally don't want to perpetuate the same thinking forever. The other thing to keep in mind, we all toured out at Public Works, and you take a look in the shop where we do a fabulous job to keep everything running and everything there. We've got this giant bus lift that we're working with. And I know we've got other style lifts in the budget this year. I think they're good investment for us, but we've got a whole infrastructure behind this type of busing to drive around 33 passenger buses empty most of the time. And I just think it's time to rethink that.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and just to caveat that thought, again, I'm not in favor of getting rid of busing, but one thing just from my time serving on other boards, and one of them being the Visit Minot board, and some of the events and the Paralympics, the sled hockey team that came, Thor Nelson, who did a great job running that event, was looking for those people mover buses like we're talking about. Maybe that would be even a revenue stream for the city to rent those buses out. Will fill in a community need. I mean, I think he was turning over every rock to try to find as many buses as he could, and even asked me to drive out to Montana with him to get buses to bring them back for those events. So just another caveat that we could fill another need with those types of investments.
Would you be interested, Mike, in funding a smaller bus or a smaller amount?
Yeah,
Just a question.
again, I would love for our final reading to have Brian and team come back and say, hey, here's some other options. We've got a motion on the floor and we'll take a vote on that. That's all fine. I would really like to see us rethink that. Even if long-term, it's a mixed fleet. If we've got 8 routes, if we've got 4 of them that never have school kids on them, they don't need to be the ones that we're running today. There are other uses, but keeping in mind that Service Base and Transit takes care of a lot of the special needs busing that's going on. Special needs school busing is handled by the school district. That's why they've got all the yellow buses by Nash Finch. They run bus routes. We don't run regular busing, but we do for special needs. And so I think a reconfiguration, this is a great time, and absolutely for the final reading, I would be interested. If we were going to spend, say, 150 and that bought us a people mover instead of this type, I'd be all for it.
Mr. Mayor? And just one other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with these smaller buses, you don't need CDL drivers to run them either, right? So it becomes better for the city finding employees to drive these smaller buses, or maybe easier, not better, but.
I think that depends on the size, though,
Yeah.
too. You can still have.
And Mr. Mayor, just to clarify on that, because I did have a conversation with Brian back and forth on that, and it is a good question. I don't think of it so much as we wouldn't have CDL drivers on every single one. It's that we're more flexible if something came up. It gives us more flexibility if you go with and you can specify the bus type to make sure it stays under the limit, is the point.
Yeah. Mark?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I am amenable to the suggestion that between and we can vote this down and then bring it back up at the final reading. I'm amenable to staff coming back with some alternatives or reasons why alternatives of a different type of bus or smaller bus or people movers or Surreys or whatever you want to call it would not be acceptable, or to endorse that and give us some idea of what it should be. So At this point, if we want to vote this down and ask for that to be brought back, I'm comfortable with that.
We have Brian Harenka. He's got his hands raised. Brian, what would you like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'd just like to respond to some of the comments I've been hearing here in regards to some of the services we provide and how those are being done with the equipment that we currently have. Yes, Alderman Blessum's right. We do have times where our buses are very lightly used. You could drive around and see 3 or 4 people on a bus that is meant to carry 27. Could we put a smaller bus out there during those times? Absolutely. But those smaller 12 to 16 passenger buses like you see Service Basin Transit driving around will not meet the needs when we're at our peak times of the day. We would still need to have the larger buses available for those peak times. All we would be doing is adding more vehicles to our fleet that we would have to have. We'd be adding more staff hours in going out and transporting these buses back and forth to trade them out when we wanted to put a bigger bus on a route for a peak period versus a smaller bus when it's not on peak. And as far as the question on putting them on certain routes that don't get school ridership, out of our 8 routes, that doesn't happen. The way our routes are set up and the way our routes are used, all of our routes during the peak periods at times have capacity constraints where we would need those larger capacities. And it changes on a daily basis. Yes, today I may have had a route that during a peak period may have only had 15 or 20 passengers on it. But 3 weeks from now when the temperature starts to drop, that same route, that same bus may have 32 on it. We can't gauge that from day to day. I will tell you that our ridership is steadily increasing, that we just recently had our highest July and August that we've had in a number of years, and we expect that to continue to go up as we have our new routes on board. So I can come back with additional information, but I don't believe that going to a smaller bus and trying to go that route is conducive to running a fixed route operation in the city of Minot.
Thank you, Brian. Lisa.
Mr. Mayor, and this would be a question for Brian. Are federal funds available for people mover type buses, or are there certain regulations on the type of bus that we would purchase?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Olson, yes, we would still be eligible for federal funds for those type of buses. They fall under the same criteria as what we're doing now for our larger diesel buses, excuse me. But I just don't think they would fit the bill. Some of the other things these buses give us is better accessibility for our handicapped persons on a fixed route. All of the smaller buses are handicap accessible, but the majority of them have lifts that take a lot longer to use and are a lot more cumbersome, that are more made for the demand response type use that Service Basin does, where you pull up to a store or somebody's house and you're taking care of that. Not when you're on a fixed route and you're trying to run around in a certain amount of time, and now you have to stop and run this lift to use it to transport somebody that may need that service. Our buses are meant to do that while on a fixed route. Our buses are designed for fixed route. Those cutaway buses, they are not designed for fixed route type service. They're designed for on-demand door-to-door type service.
Thank you.
Brian, what in your opinion, what's the ideal size bus?
In my opinion, the ideal size bus is currently just about what we're running. We could go, we're running 32 feet buses right now. The current contract I'm looking at gives us an option of 30 or 35 or 40, and we are looking at a 30 foot, which is the 29, 30 foot range is the smallest bus you can get in a fixed route heavy duty type transit bus that is designed for fixed route use. And that is what we're looking at in our current purchase that we have already gotten approved.
Any other questions? Any further discussion? Thank you, Brian. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Dancer,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Bittner,
No.
Ross,
No.
Samuelson,
No.
Blessum,
No.
Fuller,
No.
motion failed.
So is this, I mean, just following up on that, is this, are we giving direction to Brian to come back before before, what would it be, the 23rd, with maybe a recommendation or an alternate plan?
I guess what I take from what Brian's saying is that he's given us his recommendation. You know, if he takes a look closer and he's got other thoughts, I'm open to talking more. I mean, I always would be.
Harold?
Mr. Mayor, point of order, and maybe the city attorney can correct me, but since the council took action on this tonight, in order for it to be reconsidered, it would have to be one of the members who voted no on it that would ask for reconsideration so they could change their vote. Am I correct on that?
Yes, a member in the majority that at this meeting or the next successive meeting.
Okay, moving on. Any further discussion on the budget? Any further discussion on the budget? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Right? Yeah.
Yes, to approve the budget as amended. Yes.
To approve the budget as amended. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Bittner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Samuelson,
Yes.
Blessam,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Yes, Harold.
If I may, just for point of clarification, we did schedule a special council meeting next week for further budget work, and I'm asking, is that meeting still necessary, or are people comfortable with where the budget is now? And any further changes will be done at the next regular council meeting, so staff is prepared and ready.
And I apologize I apologize. Dave, I wanted to get your input on it before we actually voted. Is it clear? The amendments?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think we were tracking everything. Jenna and I both took notes separately, and we can always review the actual video of the meeting if we have any questions, so I think we're in a good spot.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I guess I was the main one that asked for that, and I think we did a great job tonight, so I would leave it to the rest of the council. I'm sitting good.
Yeah, I think the next scheduled council meeting, second reading, will be sufficient for me.
I agree. We can skip the special meeting on the 23rd as far as I'm concerned too.
Pat?
Yep, I agree.
Yes.
Good, okay.
Alderman Janser.
Janser?
Yes, I'm in agreement with the rest of the council. I think we got a lot of work done tonight, and I don't think we need a meeting next Tuesday or whenever that was.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may interject, and members of the council, I was one of the ones that was concerned because of the way the calendar falls with our regularly scheduled meeting in October, and the deadline to get the budget to the county was 3 days. We have to have an overnight process to update our reporting tool, so that actually only gave us 2 days. So if we were to leave a number of changes, and primarily what we're concerned about was the salary and benefits issues, because that is very tedious to go through and update that. We didn't want to be doing that in 2 days. So with what was done tonight and the work and the direction that we have, I think we're in a comfortable position, even if there are changes, as long as they are not substantial or deviate tremendously from where we're at. I think we're in a good position.
Okay, moving on to item 9 on the agenda, that's personal appearances. Now is an opportunity for those who wish to address the council to step forward. I would just request that you hold your comments to 5 minutes out of respect for others who wish to speak.
Mayor, City Council, my name's Charles Tuttle. I live on 11th Street here in Minot. I'm actually here on behalf of the hundreds of volunteers that went out and gathered signatures to put Measure 4 on the ballot. Hundreds of them volunteered. I think it's probably the first time in the history of North Dakota that it was a grassroots 41,000 signatures. And then I go to Dickinson and I open the paper there up and I see property tax proposal concerns North Dakota mayors. Big city mayors are against a plan to end property taxes as they currently exist. I'm sure that I hope this is just an oversight on the mayor's part, that they don't understand that to go against and use taxpayer dollars to oppose or support an initiated measure by the people is illegal. 16
And where were those?
I'm sorry?
Where were the taxpayer dollars? I didn't use any taxpayer dollars.
You used the term mayor, and you referred to Tom Ross said, speaking on behalf of the city of Minot.
That's the
People,
reporters.
in parentheses.
That's what the reporter said. That's
Well,
not
then you
what I
should
said.
have it corrected. You should have it corrected. You should apologize. Here are capable of handling our day-to-day businesses. You shouldn't be opposing or supporting anything as far as what the people are doing. Now, you could have said, I'm not speaking on behalf as a mayor. I'm speaking on behalf. Look, this is somewhere of an expertise of mine. 16.1-10 is very specific. And not only that, I talked to Corey, the writer, and this was kind of like coordinated. Then we might have a collusion issue. We've got a mayor, and I'm hoping this is not in the records here, but we got mayors asking the League of Cities to oppose this measure. The League of Cities is supported by our tax dollars. The League of Cities and the Association of Counties are criminally negligent when they go out and oppose or support an initiated measure by the people. If you take an oath to uphold the Constitution of North Dakota, it says powers are reserved to the people. When you do things like this, you're speaking as if you're more concerned about your peers than you are your constituents. It is a criminal matter. We're going to be looking at that. And I would hope that you would bite your tongue next time, not go out there and oppose. These people worked hard to do this. They stood out in the rain, the snow. You'd have no idea what it is to go out and go out of your comfort zone to ask somebody to support something. And I'm listening to you folks here tonight, and sales tax revenues, you want them to go up? Abolish the property tax. You want people to move into your community, make you a stable community? Let them have home ownership. When people have $500 a month extra in their pockets, you're going to have all the things that you want and the surpluses you need, and you won't have to worry about overtaxing people like we are with our property taxes. I'm not speaking on that. I'm speaking on the issue, though, of the mayors and the government, any government entity, anyone speaking out against or for an initiated measure by the people is against the law.
Well, there's a process.
I'm sorry?
I hope
You
you
took
follow,
an oath to uphold the Constitution.
I hope
You took your oath.
I hope you follow the process then.
I'm telling you, I'm hoping that you
I
will
have.
start upholding your end. When you take an oath to uphold the Constitution, you don't do things like these. And don't sit there and say, well, I'll wait for them to take action. No, you have to. Go and apologize. Go make an apology to the public and say, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I overstepped my authority. I wasn't speaking on behalf of the people of Minot. I was speaking in my own behalf. Do that. Jill Schramm's right here. She can write the article for you. Thank you. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor.
Now is your opportunity if you wish to step forward to speak to the council.
Passing these down, Leif?
Yes, if you could. Leif Snyder, resident of Minot. Many of you know I ran for city council. As you can relate, sitting there on council, you field a few calls. What's weird to me is some of the calls to me haven't stopped. Now, I find that odd because usually it's followed up with me explaining that I have no authority, and you realize I lost. But they say, they tell me yes, but you'll listen. So to be honest, for the first time ever, I don't want to be at the podium tonight. This sucks. But to quote a good friend of mine, they said doing the easy, doing the comfortable thing, and doing the right thing are rarely the same thing. I'm not going to reference the Minot Police Department. You can't comment on it, therefore I shouldn't either. But I will reference the media release that was put out. In it, City Manager Stewart said, "We will work to be sure our response is appropriate and constructive. Our goal is to be sure our staff and our community can take pride in the process and feel valued, heard, protected, and appreciated." I hope that sentiment continues for all city staff. It was years ago when Harold Stewart and I first met. He was on the job for about a month. You remember what that meeting was about, Mr. Stewart?
Yes, I do. You were concerned about some department heads in participating in the process of my predecessor being removed, and I believe you and Mr. Chalmers stated that you want to make sure the same thing didn't happen to me.
I gave you guys the same copy of part of what I handed out to Mr. Stewart. It involves a conversation between the HR director and myself. Keep in mind, I had never met the HR director. It was initiated by her. As a city department head, she suggested I come to her office so I can spar with her in person. Little different, but the gist of the meeting was I was telling Harold he has an HR problem. I think the morale of city staff kind of proves that. This is the part that sucks, and I don't want to be here because those calls continue to me. So why does city staff not feel valued or appreciated? When the lack of safety from one employee is noted and pointed out to management, as the city employee handbook states should be done for unsafe driving and abuse of equipment, and it's ignored by management, and then the same employee drives the truck into a bridge, it tends to tank morale. When equipment operators working snow removal on a night shift can't reach their foreman on the radio, so they drive to his house out of town and find him there, it tends to tank morale. When an employee is trying to register a complaint about being harassed in one city department and they are told, "I don't have the authority to do anything. You will just have to wait until they retire," that tanks morale. Because it involves victims, I will not mention the details about the incidents of sexual harassment I have heard from staff and former staff, but they do exist, and that tanks morale. The narrative that I hear over and over again is the same, and it's this: I like my job. I don't mind the tasks I need to accomplish for that job, but I hate coming to work every day because my supervisor treats me like crap. Or it's my coworkers that treat me like crap, and my supervisor won't do anything about it. It's toxic, and the reporting process is a joke. I told City Manager Stewart years ago, you have an HR problem. Now I'm telling the rest of you. If any of you sitting at the dais truly believe that city staff deserve to feel valued, heard, protected, and appreciated, I ask you to please do something about it, because giving them a cookie on their birthday isn't cutting it. I told you that sucks. Yeah, I upset some people, but
Now's an opportunity for you, for those who wish to step forward and address the council.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Wendy Bagley. I live at 701 19th Avenue Southeast, apartment 11 here in Minot. I stood up a couple weeks ago with some questions and concerns, and I'd like to report that Councilmember Blessum did come with my group and spent a good couple hours talking to many members of our community about the budget process. I've watched a little bit more of the videos that are online, and you did a fabulous job with all the different segments. I'm grateful that the segments on each of the departments you split up, so it's a little bit more bite size. I really appreciated that. I did mention to the school board that I would love to have them follow your example and have an explanation from them on what the school budget would be. I have not heard back from them yet. Councilmember Pittner, last year, I remember you mentioning and looking at me directly and saying, you know, if you've got a concern, I wish you would learn more about the city budget. And I honestly am still very, very new at it. I know a little bit more than I did last year, but I'm also excited to see that a lot more people that I contacted became interested. And I know that there were at least 65 people watching this budget process online, which is pretty exciting. I wish it was more. But at the same time, I want to express gratitude for the proposals that were discussed and voted on tonight. I really appreciate the conservative cost-cutting measures implemented by Councilmember Blessum. I think it is the right direction to go to stop putting so much money. It's good to put money away for a rainy day, but it has to be balanced out with the needs of the taxpayers. And right now, so many of us are really, really hurting. When the money is there, it is extremely easy to spend. So and it's hard to make that decision. If you have to come back to the public because there is a really important need and say, hey, we need to raise taxes or we need to do this, handle that then. Don't have this huge reserve available, especially if it's going over the state mandated allowances. So I really applaud you as council members taking those steps and passing those measures today. And Mayor, I'd like to also comment on what Charles Tuttle mentioned. I know that it is a very tough thing when you're wearing a lot of hats. We put our trust in you as our mayor. And of course, you have the right to speak out on issues. But when it comes to initiated measures, there is a line drawn in the Century Code. And I would have preferred that you were very clear when you when you join in any effort to try to publicly share your opinions. You need to make sure you designate what hat you are wearing. Whether you say that it was the journalist that put the words in your mouth, maybe he did. But my thought is take that warning and know going forward that you need to be very clear. You're right as a public citizen to share your opinion, but it is not right for you as the mayor to fight against an initiation or a measure initiated by the people of this state. So, and some of your feedback too, Mr. Tuttle, I thought was a little disingenuous. It was a little defensive. So I would invite you to take that as good feedback. Again, council, thank you for the work that you do. The budget process is hard, and I'd like to end these comments. Thank you.
I'm not going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to take 5 seconds and congratulate this body in starting the journey of making Minot a better place for its citizens and its taxpayers. I think you did wonderful work tonight. Thank you.
Now's your opportunity if you wish to step forward and address the council. Seeing none, we will move on to item 10 on the agenda. That's miscellaneous and discussion items. Are there any to be brought up? Seeing none, we will move on to liaison reports. We'll start with Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report is pretty short. I attended Source Basin Loan Review Committee meeting earlier this month. The one note that I'd want to share coming forward, we have our Central Dakota MPO meeting this Thursday, the 19th, and the time has changed to 3 o'clock. So if anyone is interested in attending, we'll be meeting at 3.
Thank you. Mike?
For me, updates are, I got 2 meetings this week. So 9/11, 911 meeting will be Thursday, and Commission on Aging is Friday. So I'll have updates next meeting.
Paul?
Thank you, Mayor. Renaissance Zone, we had one of the action items that was approved at the Renaissance Zone on the agenda this evening. There was another application that was approved. We'll have at a later meeting to get a really underutilized building downtown back up and running with businesses and traffic. So visit Minot. Obviously, you touched on earlier, Destination Development Grant. Big win for the community. Was able to attend that this past week. We have our monthly meeting this week. Alcohol Ordinance Review and Rewrite Committee. There was a motion made at our last committee with the findings of the memo that was presented to council in executive session and released to the public. There was a motion made in that committee to move forward with staff removing the cap. That'll come back to that committee, and I believe at our October 14th meeting to have further discussion. So, and I will be attending the MPO meeting this week as an alternate, so.
Mr. Mayor, can I clarify one thing, Paul? I just make sure I caught that right. So it's coming back to your committee?
To our
On
committee.
the 14th. So
Yes.
when are you expecting it to be at council?
I'll look.
Assuming it's in shape.
So I'll give a little bit more insight. So there was public input into the motion that was made by Committee Member Black. We decided on the 14th to allow staff the time to give us a draft. There's still going to be some cracks at it. I would say hopefully sometime in late November, early December would be my thought, but I'll let some of the other attendees speak to it.
And if I may, Mayor, so we do have some direction from the council on an ordinance that they want us to draft, but there are some kind of just decisions that have to be made on how the logistics of that ordinance would be carried out. And I'm not sure quite how long that particular discussion is going to take. My hope is staff can present a proposal on how we can meet the spirit of the suggestions that were made at the committee.
So likely though, end of year, not June, right? I mean,
Correct,
That's kind of
correct.
where I'm going. Okay.
Sooner rather than later.
Done? Scott?
Ward County Planning, we had a special meeting about a week ago, just working on their long-term plan, and we have a meeting coming up on Thursday.
Rob?
Yeah, same thing, Ward County Planning Commission. We've been working on the ordinances there. Unfortunately, last week I missed the Emergency Preparedness Committee meeting because I was in another meeting. And then I don't believe we've had a library meeting yet this month.
Mark?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think the MPO meeting and the ones I'm involved in have been covered, so nothing further.
Okay. And most of mine was covered in the mayor's report. So with that, we will move on to,
Mr. Mayor, I do have one request.
oh, yep, go ahead.
Thank you. So there obviously has been discussion on when we as elected officials are able to have a voice on an initiated measure. And I know that city attorney has given us some advice in the past, but if you could resend that, I think it'd be helpful for us knowing that an election is coming up and where we stand as an elected official and where we stand as a citizen.
And just to clarify, are you talking about the memo that I had sent out that we had drafted with kind of the blurb at the end about Corrupt Practices Act?
I believe so. It was probably about 5 or 6 months ago, and I have misplaced that, and so I want to make sure that we know what our rights are as citizens, more importantly.
Definitely.
Thank you, Lisa. Nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 you.